totally not true?
Well, have they responded to that statement?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a Palin. Has Palin responded to the accusation?
That she wasn't for it before?
What her stance was?
I don't know. I haven't seen the response.
I don't know. It's probably. We can probably look at it. Anyway.
Well, this goes to the heart of who she is, I think, because this is not a I wouldn't call this an attack. I would call this political, examination.
That's fair. I think anything regarding her record is fair to talk about.
Right.
Sure, absolutely.
So another thing in that record. Let me get some ice here. Another thing in that record. You want some more ice? Yeah. She also said how she was against pork barrel spending and earmarks, because John McCain's against it, and legitimately so. He's always sort of been there.
Thanks.
Sarah Palin now says that she's against it, but in Alaska, she was one of the largest pork barrel earmark governors, and in like the entire Congress.
Explain to me how executive branch can be into pork barrel.
No, I'm sorry.
And
well, she was a governor, so she was not. So she was not like in Congress, but she hired lobbyists to go to Washington and get earmarks for Alaska. She did, dude. It's very well known now. It's out there, and that's what she did.
I think this is going to bring up a whole different topic. Which I don't know if we want to segue into or tangent off this line just yet. But what I will say as a statement is that the system as it stands now, which is the lobbying system, exists for some reason. That is the natural consequence of people trying to get their views heard in Washington, is you hire a lobbyist. And everyone does it on both sides of the aisle. They all hire lobbyists to represent their interests.
Okay, but we're talking about lobbying and earmarking are related.
They're related.
But they're not the same thing.
Right.
Because what we're talking about is hiring a lobbyist to go and get specific earmarks in a bill that haven't been discussed on the floor of Congress. They've just been thrown into the bill at the end. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. That's what McCain is against, and Obama's against, and Palin now says she's against. But in reality, she was all for it when she was governor, and she was pronouncing to her people how she was bringing all of this great stuff to Alaska. In fact, while she was governor, Alaska had a higher per capita federal earmark spending than any other state. Granted, per capita is a little bit.
Yeah.
Alaska doesn't have a very high capita, but you get the point. She was not against it. She's saying that she's against it now because McCain is, but it's just that kind of stuff that's like, okay.
So what you're saying is she was a typical politician.
She was a typical politician. Even
she was like Bill Clinton in
even maybe a little worse than a typical politician, I would say.
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go verify that, and what was it for? Was it something that was, from their perspective, was justified or legitimate? I think all those things are fair things to discuss, and I don't. I do think that it's going to be hard to find any two people who agree on absolutely everything, and politically, especially when you get a running mate. Like, I guarantee you that if John McCain got Joe Lieberman, then those two men would disagree on certain things. The primary one being abortion. And so would one of them then change their position to accommodate the other one? I don't know that that's out of the realm of possibility.
Well, usually the vice president...
so if the president says earmarks are gone, and she goes, okay.
Right.
If she changes her position, then that's a...
I can see that. I can see that, and I would not even be against that. What I'm against is her standing up on the Republican convention floor and saying, I've had a history of opposing this, and we're going to oppose this in the future.
Well, she does have a reputation of opposing corruption in Alaska.
Yeah, even though she was involved in a lot of corruption in Alaska.
Well, now you're talking about earmarking being corruption.
No, I'm talking about a whole different thing that I can't tell you the details of, but I remember Ted Stevens. She was very closely linked to Ted Stevens, who's now totally discredited.
Yeah.
They were close.
Well, I think any two senators are going to be close to...
She's not a senator.
No, to a governor. Any two states' senators are going to be close to a governor.
Well,
they're going to have some sort of working relationship.
Yeah, but...
And so, close, corruption. What does that mean? That they talked?
I don't know.
I mean, what does that mean? That's not corruption.
It'll come out more. It'll come out more.
But to make the accusation that's corruption without the basis of some sort of actual money or, some sort of conspiracy, come on. Just because she had a working relationship with her?
Dude, let's put it this way. She was a governor for less than 2 years, right? Maybe a little more than 2 years. And she's already linked with a guy like Ted Stevens. It's like, how long does it...
You know what? It would be really hard for me to link any governor to any of the two state senators. Give me a break. You can link...
Yeah, but not all the state senators
especially if they're in the same party.
Ted Stevens!
Especially if they're in the same party.
Right! But this is Ted Stevens. This is the guy who's, like, currently the worst offender of corruption in the whole Senate, man. He's the guy on the floor. He's the guy that's...
go back and look. One of the first things that she did as governor was crack down on corruption and some of the bad cronyism that was going on in the state. That's one of the first things she did.
Sure.
And she didn't make a lot of friends doing that. And it wasn't in her best interest politically, at least with the legislative branch of Alaska. Now, it made her very popular with her state, which is shown by her 80% approval rating in Alaska, which is huge.
Oh, I got another one. One of the reasons she has that 80% approval rate is because she put a windfall tax on the oil companies. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Which now she's opposed to.
Yeah, and I was like, windfall taxing oil companies. I didn't actually necessarily like that.
But that's how she gave back $1,200 to every family in Alaska.
Right, that is how she gave back $1,200 to every.
And that's part of why she's so popular.
Now, and that's also why McCain, I think, she's an asset to McCain, because McCain has a reputation of, at least in rhetoric, going after companies like that. Maybe he won't go and attack them in law, but at least he'll publicly state, hey, we need to take a hard look at this.
Publicly state, that's the thing. And that's what this all boils down to, is that I feel like the Republicans are going to publicly state how they want to change Washington and how they want to just get out the administration and what did he say? I loved how he said that we need to get rid of the big government spending, people in Washington and get rid of them. You're like, who are you talking about, dude? You're talking about your own administration. And he's like excoriating them for what? For stuff that he's been alongside with the entire time. He voted with them 90% of the time, yet now he's saying, yeah, this guy thinks it's good, but the country doesn't. That's the thing. Look, and John McCain realizes that the country does not want the same thing for another 4 to 8 years.
No. This is what it comes down to. This is what John McCain was talking about, and this is the Republican perspective. There is spending's out of control. I think you and I can agree on that. Now, there's one thing that trumps everything else, and that's national security. And that's what the Republicans would state. So, when you spend a lot on national security, then the equations change a little bit. That trumps this whole spending cap that people will talk about. Because I'll say that the Democrats want to tax and spend, you'll say we spend so many gazillion dollars in Iraq, and you say it's actually the Republicans who are spending all this money. But I would say that the distinction is that national security trumps everything. If you have to spend a lot of money for national security, you do it.
Okay.
Period.
But then you got to decide whether that money is well spent on national security.
I think that's a fine discussion.